You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
Welcome back. Of course, the biggest political headline from this week was the Electoral College officially affirming that Joe Biden will, in fact, become the next president of the United States. There were no so-called faithless electors or any other voting irregularities. The final electoral vote tally was 306 votes for Biden and 232 for President Trump. Congress will officially count those votes on January 6th. Advisors for the president say he will keep fighting to overturn the results, saying there has been plenty of evidence of voter fraud. Unlike other Republicans on Capitol Hill, Congressman Jody Arrington does not believe the president should concede. So we asked him why, and when the election is certified, will he even work with the Biden White House?
I was going to talk about the elephant in the room. You put out a statement this week about President-elect Joe Biden that you have yet to acknowledge President-elect Biden. Basically, your statement said it's important for all claims to be examined and resolved by the courts before declaring a winner. Talk about that, your thought process on that, and if you will ever acknowledge President-elect Joe Biden, who will become president in January.
Well, I can promise you this, there will come a time when I will acknowledge a president, and I will respect the presidency, and I will do everything I can to work with that person to move our country forward to the extent that I can, okay? Whether it's Joe Biden or Donald J. Trump. What I think is important, because we are coming out of an unprecedented year, right? I mean, in every way. And we've seen unprecedented changes, fundamental changes to election laws all across the country. And it's opened things up to mass fraud, corruption, human error, like we've never had before. And so that's the first concern I have. The second is there's been a pattern of irregularity throughout the country in various states. There are allegations that are serious allegations by our fellow citizens, affidavits to support that. There are constitutional questions, which I think are questions of the highest order. That is, for example, can any entity other than state legislatures create or change election laws? Well, the Article 2 of the Constitution is clear. The answer is no. Legislatures and legislatures alone, the lawmaking body of the states, are the sole authority to make or change election laws. But we saw in Pennsylvania that the courts changed them, or in Georgia, secretaries of state changed them. This does not have any bearing, or at least my concerns, any bearing on the outcome of the election. We have to make sure that we have the integrity intact for electoral process going forward, and that all these questions are vetted out in the courts, that we allow rule of law to play out, and then when the dust settles and all the claims have been heard and examined, then we can move forward, and then you'll garner the very most in terms of the public's confidence. You'll have upheld the Constitution, protected the integrity of the elections, answered the constitutional questions, and then I think we'll have the best shot at having the most public confidence to get our country to move forward from this point, regardless of who the president is. And I think that's important. 80% of Republican voters don't believe that this election was legitimate, and they believe that there were all kinds of problems that give them a great pause. That's going to be a problem if we don't let this process play out. So we don't need a short circuit. We need to let it play out, and we need to have the confidence in the process between now and when we have a declarative and definitive winner.
If the roles were reversed, Congressman Arrington, let's say President Trump was in the role, was to be reelected, would you still feel the same way about that?
I would, absolutely. And let me tell you why. The outcome is important. There are plenty of Republicans that want President Trump to be the president, and it's almost evenly divided. And you have plenty of Democrats that want Joe Biden. But I said this when we experienced in the last Congress the first partisan impeachment ever. Now, you remember there were a lot of folks that did not embrace President Trump as a legitimate president. And for years, they pursued the Russia collusion narrative and then ultimately the first partisan impeachment. My concern was that we would destroy the presidency with that when we opened that Pandora's box, we could never close it. I'm concerned about the presidency. I'm concerned about the Constitution. I'm concerned about rule of law. These are principles that will ensure that we have an exceptional country from this point forward, regardless of who's president, regardless of what party's in power. So to me, it's just making sure that when you have an unprecedented situation, when you have systemic and national changes to election laws and all these questions that I've just referenced, you've got to vet those out. You've got to let the courts, the third branch, the judicial branch, is a critical part of our democracy. So let those claims play out. I'd never want to short circuit an individual who had claims that they wanted to have their day in court for any reason, not the least of which would be the importance of a presidential election. So yes, I would say that process would have to play out. We did that with Al Gore versus George W. Bush, who I served with for 10 years. We watched it play out, and at some point, Vice President Gore conceded. But that process, I don't think anybody was questioning the patriotism or the motives of people that said that needed to play out in the courts as it did. Too much at stake, too important to the Constitution and to our republic to not let this thing fully process.
A couple last questions for you, Congressman. Kind of a follow-up to that. If the dust settles and, like you said, it plays out in the courts and President-elect Joe Biden is confirmed, the winner and will be inaugurated in January, would you be willing to work with the White House on some things and some policies in the future?
Listen, whether it's Joe Biden, President Trump, or, however it shakes out, I'm always going to respect the person who occupies the Oval Office and the presidency of the United States. I served with the president. I worked in the White House. I briefed presidents in the Oval Office. Our country's success is more important than any one election. It's more important than the politics of the day. And we have a nation and citizens who are counting on us to make sure that we continue to address the challenges, to fix the problems, and to move our country forward in a way that keeps the union intact. There's a tremendous stress right now on the fabric of our country. There's great division in this country. And I don't take joy in that. I want more civil discourse. And I want us to be able to work together as best we can. We need to debate the issues, and we need robust debate. And I make no apology for the principles and the values that I stand on and that I fight for. But I don't tear people down, and I think we've got to dial this thing back on all fronts. I mean, we've watched the cities of our great country burning down to the ground with radical, leftist groups like Antifa, and we cannot allow the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and the ability to peacefully protest be hijacked by folks like that. And we can't allow that even in our discourse today. We cannot allow the nastiness and the personal attacks.
A little more from Congressman Arrington right after this.
Shouldn't free actually mean free?
Many television providers